Hello, I have perfected SCHiM on Steam by collecting all 24 achievements. This includes getting separated from a human, interacting with every object, completing the game without respawning, and a lot more we'll touch on a bit later. Welcome to my full review. SCHiM is a relaxing, isometric 3D puzzle platformer being developed by two guys named Yvonne and Niels, while being published by Extra Nice and Playism. I apologize for butchering the names. Full disclosure, I was graciously provided a review copy of the game from the wonderful Pirate PR on behalf of the devs. With that in mind, it will not be altering my opinion on the title. Starting off with the settings, visually, it's quite immersive, and I like how the options text comes into view. Quickly going over said options, the video tab holds your resolution, VSync, all three screen modes, which is lovely by the way, and if you prefer thicker outlines, the option is here. The audio tab holds your music and sound effects, with a third option to disable splash sounds. This can be a confusing option as turning it off doesn't stop the splashing sounds within the menus, but instead it stops the splashing sounds in-game. The controls tab allows you to change any keybind to your heart's content. Given the style of game, this is greatly underappreciated. You're also given the option to disable vibration if playing on a controller, which I would heavily recommend using. It's playable on keyboard, but feels a lot more fluid on controller. At the end of the day, it does come down to your own preference. These star settings won't appear until you've completed the game once, and they simply just provide extra difficulty options. I found it a bit weird not giving them their own tab, however they compensate by keeping a spinning star by said options. Not a big fan as it reminds me of a notification I can't get rid of, but it does its job. The final options are actually quite hidden and only shown while in-game under colors, allowing you to change any of the colors within the stage you're currently in. This is insanely helpful for overly bright levels or those with any type of color blindness. The one downside with this option is it doesn't seem to save going into other similar colored stages, so you're forced to readjust them every single time. As for the technical side of things, please note I'm running this off a low to high-end PC, so how this performs for me might not perform the same for you. With that being said, I experienced literally no issues whatsoever. While the graphics card is required, I would be surprised if you couldn't run this off your human's laptop. As for the difficulty, there are no difficulty options. The difficulty of the game comes down to how well you can jump from one shadowed puddle to another. Once you beat the game, you'll also unlock previously mentioned options to make it more difficult on yourself, which will allow you to remove your safety jump, checkpoints, or limiting the amount of fails you can have through an entire playthrough. 20 being the set number. These options are also where the replayability comes into play, so without them, there would be no real challenge or need to replay. For a full completion, you could expect to play through at least 2 to 3 times, if not more, depending on skill level, or if you're achievement hunting. It took me 3 full playthroughs, not including the hour of attempts for a specific achievement, or my resets. As for the gameplay, in short, SCHiM is a 3D platformer about jumping from one shadow to another, following a wholesome story about your human and interacting with every object you see. It has 65 levels and over 70 hidden items to collect. Starting from the beginning, you're thrown into a straightforward tutorial going over all the basic keybinds and how to progress your objectives. You'll notice fairly quickly there is little to no UI elements, which I thought fit perfectly, outside of the panning zoom to and from objectives. My biggest complaint about the entire game comes down to the amount of panning used throughout. It's used at the start of every single stage, checking out your current objective, and flinging yourself to out-of-reach puddles. It greatly messes with my head, usually providing motion sickness and oftentimes a headache. I had to take frequent breaks or look completely away from my monitor while they happened. That being said, not all the panning bothered me, just the cutscenes on every new stage. They start to get incredibly long while slowly panning over the world, which is also in its own motion. A quick and easy way to help this would be letting us skip the panning sections, or at the very least provide a button to hold down, making the panning go a lot faster. Another good option would have been keeping the guidance arrows from the beginning and pointing at the objective with this, versus panning at all. Speaking of going fast, let's touch on the movement mechanics. Overall, the movement is simple, satisfying, and it feels incredible to jump around the shadows. Something that is not mentioned that you may quickly learn is the jumping mechanics are under Mario rules, meaning a light, quick tap of the jump key will not jump as far or high as a longer press. This little mechanic gave the parkour a nice boost of life and challenge in some of its sections. As for the other movement-related mechanics, they're pretty self-explanatory. Wires will fling you into the air, umbrellas will throw you in any direction of your choosing, and chairs or clothing lines will throw you in a spun direction. As for the umbrellas though, they're a bit weird. You'd expect the controls to be inverted, allowing you to aim and fling your little guy to his desired location. However, you point in the direction you want to go and the umbrella does the rest. Missed opportunity for a more fun mechanic. The last thing I'll mention here are the collision physics. They're a bit too good. There are times I'd be running through risky mode, which is the name of the limited lives run, and hit my froggy head off the top of a vehicle or dead stop at a pole. While it frustrated me beyond belief, I loved that attention to detail. As for the puzzles, they're all casually location, patience, or interaction based. Location as in some stages require you to find hidden objects to provide an extra location to jump into. You'll need some patience as a few stages require you waiting around for people or vehicles to cross your path. While interacting with certain objects such as these buttons will open doors allowing you to progress forward. All in all, nothing is complicated and the puzzles are very laid back, which is good news for those looking for a relaxing platformer. Moving into the shadowed world of SCHiM, visually its aesthetic is charmingly beautiful and quite clever in design. The developers mentioned one of the main inspirations they had while making the game was the nostalgic Floor is Lava game we all played at some point or another. I have to say I think they nailed that inspiration dead on and the worlds resemble that perfectly. While each stage has its own colored aesthetic, having the option to change that vibe at any given time makes the worlds feel custom to you, which I think is a small lovely thing. The worlds themselves, as mentioned before, are all locked within stages. While it's never an open world, they do a decent job making the stages feel much larger than they actually are, whether that be using people to your advantage, creating your own path, or transitioning over to a continued location. Most of the stages also allow you to go off the beaten path in search of hidden collectibles. While I did enjoy the overall world design, there's one thing I wasn't a huge fan of, which is being provided the option to explore on my own, only to be slapped with an invisible wall for traveling too far out. While reaching said wall, you'll be thrown to the floor and forced to perish away. I think a simple loop back around could have sufficed, or possibly not showing any of the shadows leading out of bounds. It made exploring the world for collectibles a bit confusing, but it's also not that big of a deal. As for the audio, they pretty much nailed every part of it. Starting with the splashing sounds, which you can turn off, made the hopping around shadows feel so, for the lack of better terms, goopy, which I absolutely loved. The entire soundtrack is created by Moonsailor and made up of nothing but peaceful tracks fitting the entire vibe perfectly. Plons has to be my favorite track due to its mysterious feel. And then this flute goes off. Oh, love it. Hey, you made it to the story section and my thoughts on it. I won't be covering the spoilers in depth, but if you'd like to avoid them, skip ahead to the positive and negative section below. Ready? Okay. You play as a SCHiM, which is the soul and spirit of an object, thing, or living being, never to be separated from their specific thing. Our thing being a young human, who we go about the years of his life, playfully jumping from shadow to shadow while watching time quickly pass. We'll watch our child grow through their life, going to school, finding love, graduating, and even eventually getting a job, until things start taking a massive turn. You'll watch as your human gets fired from his job, lose the love of his life, and just starts going through all the hardships humans usually do, which eventually will cause him to trip, doing the unthinkable and separating us in his stumble. As we try to make our way back, he gets up, drained from life, and runs away. We're now fully detached from our human with the only objective to get him back. Now I'll be honest, from what little I've seen going into it, I didn't expect the game to have such an emotional story attached to it. I was blindsided by the cute aesthetics and slapped repeatedly while hopping my way through this human's life. There are a lot of parts that are very relatable and can hit home to many, or at the very least, make you feel bad for the guy you're chasing. Almost like you're his single last hope he doesn't know about. Losing everything and trying your hardest to bounce back is a very hard feat. Overall, I thought the story was great, and having a happy ending made it a whole lot better. Speaking of which, I thought the shadowed realm your human got sucked into was such an awesome concept. It is my favorite part of the story by far. As for the ending, it's also quite wholesome and could even be used as a cliffhanger for a sequel. That being said, the story can feel very dragged out, and a large majority of it is a game of cat and mouse. You're stuck in this poor dude, hoping to hop back in his shadow, only to get a few feet away to watch him run away every single time. This made the playable side of the story quite infuriating. In a perfect game world, I think instead of dragging out the filler stages, have the entire current story squished to a little over 3/4 of the game, and then branch off the current ending into more human-focused gameplay, going over all of his other accomplishments, getting married, the whole 9 yards. Better yet, there is a great sequel idea. SCHiM 2 is going from SCHiM 1's end to Grandpa passing on the shadowed torch to his kid. Perfect. I'll see my name in the credits, you're welcome. Anyway, as mentioned before, there are a total of 24 achievements, all of which took me 14 hours to obtain, while a single playthrough takes around 4. I will not be mentioning the ones handed to you just by playing, however let's start with the more missable achievements, such as Cannonball, where you must jump into the water 50 times. This was interesting, as you'd have to fail quite a lot during the few select water stages, which I of course didn't, so I had to cheese it afterwards. Mischievous is to water down everything in the backyard. This took a few attempts to pop, but it is such a unique and silly achievement. Hole in one, you guessed it, land a hole-in-one in the golf course. I'm not kidding, this took me about an hour of attempts to get right. I think I could honestly become a pro in golfing. Anyway, the hardest achievement award will be going to Risky Mode, where you must finish the game with a limited 20 lives. I made this achievement much harder on myself by also having my extra jump turned off and checkpoints disabled. This achievement was by far the hardest to obtain due to all the micro mistakes you can make throughout your playthrough. One wrong hop and there goes a life. And yes, my frustration did slowly grow. All in all, SCHiM has some unique achievements that were all quite fun to obtain, and as a bonus you can do them all fairly quickly. I do wish there were more achievements throughout that took the silly fun route, but I can't complain. Now let's go over some of the positives. SCHiM is an original IP made by only 2 developers. It has a unique aesthetic, focused around being a relaxing time, followed by an emotional story, and has so much quality of life you really can't complain. As for the negatives, it's quite short if you're not chasing the achievements, and yet can feel very dragged on or repetitive. The playable story isn't that compelling, and the pan zoom can cause motion sickness if not played in spurts. In conclusion, SCHiM is a short, original game with a gorgeous aesthetic, peaceful soundtrack, emotional story, and all around a great time. But would I recommend it? Well, SCHiM is currently available for 33 Canadian doll hairs, or your regional equivalent on Steam, Xbox, PlayStation, or the Nintendo Switch storefronts. After playing through, you can tell how much love was put into creating the game, and it's absolutely worth supporting them. However, with that being said, as a Canadian, if I wasn't provided a review copy of the game, I would be waiting for a sale. While the aesthetic and concept are very eye-catching, I don't think its current price is fair without an attached original soundtrack or at least longer gameplay. Once again, a huge thanks to Robbie from Pirate PR and the developers for providing me a key to this review. Pirate PR also mentioned at some point it's good to have a rating, so this review onward you can expect a rating. SCHiM, 5 out of 6. That's my rating. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. Let me know your thoughts down below, or what game I should complete next. Subscribe so you never miss a video, and until next time, take care.